Welcome to I'm From the Internet, a podcast about somethingawful.com, the goons, and their consequences. I'm Chicago illustrator Winslow Dumaine, and I'm sitting here with Jaybrandstetter, an internet historian. Jay, how have you been, man?
The past couple of weeks have been pretty hectic. I didn't get to talk about last time because we had a big guest, but I've been really busy at work. His Fred broke one of his ribs just by himself, like basically in his sleep, which is very scary to think about. So
wow.
It's my first time having to deal with a broken bone on the job, and it's broken from the back, which is really tough because that's you lie on your back, it affects everything. He's only had ones broken from the front before, so it's new for both of us, but it's, I've been taking care of him. It kind of does a nice lead into the episode's theme because we've been playing a lot of games together since he can't really do very much. He can't do his computer stuff because he can't move or anything. So we've been playing games together, and that's been fun. So getting to hang out, and it's been very exhausting as well. I'm glad this happened now and not when I first came and was in much worse shape. I could tell I'd be struggling. Whereas now it is kind of neat just to be able to flip my buddy around in his bed when I need to.
Yeah. No, that's a nightmare, man. As someone who's only mildly broken a part of me, I'm sure, part of the Winslow lore is that a guy ran into me while I was on my bike and I smashed my teeth and nose and wrist and the whole shebang. That was a couple of years ago. Yeah. Well, shit. Yeah, it's been a hell of a few weeks since we had a proper sit down, because our last episode was with Hot Dad. So, my computer died. My tower that I use for all of my design stuff had some sort of error. So that whole thing went down, and I had to outsource, a bunch of help to my Instagram followers. And some people were helpful. Other people were just scary. I'll say that. Legally speaking, I'll just say that they were scary. And then, that fucker's, the computer's still at the Micro Center. So I'm at a weird part where it's do I wait to upgrade or do I not? I don't know. But then Trump got shot, which didn't, I will admit, I rather quickly just said well, this is it. The nation's going to rally around him, and the already deeply cucked libs are going to cuck themselves even further and no longer run. They stopped running ads immediately, and I was well, this is it. We're toast. But then we all started gabbing about Biden dropping out, and he did. And that, I don't know, it sounds like Kamala's doing numbers. I don't know, man. It's all moving really fucking fast. So who knows what the fuck is going to happen, man.
Yeah, nobody expected them to actually just do the obvious right thing, and they did. It's completely shaking everything up. It's very funny how they basically spent the whole Republican National Convention banking on bashing Biden for being old, and now he's not the one they're running against anymore. Yeah. It's they're literally can we get refunds on that?
Yeah, dude. The watching the GOP completely freak the fuck out. Where they are having a tantrum over not being able to bash Biden. Which is very funny because you have to do that double speak of being this guy does not belong into office. Wait, where is he going? It's kind of like the thing when getting mad at somebody for hitting on your partner, and it's just man, come on, we both agree. We both agree that she's hot. Why are you mad at me? And so then we. Looks like we have Kamala as the pick, and I don't give a shit. Nobody that I like is ever gonna end up anywhere near the handles of power, right? And so it's hey, if Kamala's, statistically better than Trump on a lot of things, we can't help anyone anywhere if the entire country is ripping itself the fuck apart. And so I'm not enthusiastic about our choice at all, but it's I just put up a TikTok where it's do we want to eat the meal that we didn't like, or do we want to drink a bottle of poison that will kill us for sure? We can make better food in the future, but we have a choice right now to either eat a meal that we for sure didn't like, or we can drink the poison that will kill us. And if we pick neither, we're going to get poisoned anyway. You know, like it's not a fun place to be for anybody. But
yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I feel like being like a fan of a politician in general is not a good look. And I'm already being like, oh man, I can tell that people being in full like fandom mode for Kamala is going to get annoying really quick. But yeah, it's like they you know, they did the thing people wanted, which was like they capitulated and like made choices based on what was like best and not just like, you know, what they'd already decided on. So I think that was a good right move. The fact that they showed they're willing to do this. And yeah, it's nice to have things change up. Like after the assassination, like you said, we thought everything was we knew how things were going to play out, and they didn't, and that's very nice. It's nice to not just be resigned to, well, I guess we know what the next 4 months are going to be like. It's like, yeah, things are shaking up, things get interesting. It's different. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's interesting to see like there are, you know, in the world of gaming and politics and music and all this stuff, there's like leaks constantly, and so people were talking about like murmurs of Biden's going to drop out, murmurs here and there. Then of course, you know, there was like counter messaging saying that he was not going to, he's going to stay in. He's going to keep going. But like we saw telegraphing of a lot of this stuff just before it happened, which is interesting because then like you start looking at all of the other things that are being, you know, shown to us as like this is the next step, like who's she gonna pick as her VP, and you're seeing like, you know, my guy on the inside says it's going to be you know, fucking Shapiro. I don't even know, you know.
Two inside sources, and those sources were the candidate and their assistant.
yeah, but I mean, like that said, is like I have like honest to God sources at like Department of Homeland Security that are like telling me some like kind of interesting things that are like they are the ones that are actually like, you know, the really plugged in cogs of the machine that see how the actual stuff works, like managers of certain aspects of that level of government. And you know, that's the people who really understand what's being moved around, right? So there are people out there. There are like leaks and interesting things that are being like floated up, but it's one of those things where it's like you have like 10,000 oracles talking to you, and you have to find the right one by just like matching the voices back and forth to like see who was right about certain things, you know, because now they're saying that Trump might drop out, and I can't imagine that at all, especially with JD Vance being such a poisoned VP. Like not just that he is like literally like a vile human being, but that plus the fact that like it's just a void of charisma. You know what I mean? Like he's funny because he's like the second. Somebody said like he's the frat guy who got dared to do an open mic, and you know this is the the videos of his speeches are him doing mics for the first time without having his frat guy friends there to back him up. You know, which I think is a really
beautiful metaphor.
Yeah, because like he has a lot of that same energy where you're just like desperately trying to make yourself seem an enjoyable person to a vast group of people who like don't know anything about you and might actually they're actually looking for you to be phony, which is like such a hard audience because like comedy people just want you to have there's like please just be funny, but JD Vance will go up there and like especially Appalachia, all of you know, I can't remember if it's Appalachia or Appalachia, whatever. I'm so sorry. But like, so many people are like, I'm so tired, rightfully so. I'm so tired of these rich Yale fucks claiming to be from our upbringing, you know, especially after he wrote Hillbilly Elegy, which is you know, it's a whole book about like, you know, all of these systemic failures that are fucking over the poorest people in the country. And his thesis for it is like, well, it's because they're lazy and stupid. You know, like that's the whole thesis. For,
unlike me, who got away from it.
Who got away from it. Yeah, it's just just like the Imperium of man in Warhammer 40,000 being like, Jesus Christ, you guys are psychopathic idiots who are like pure evil and genocidal in every direction. And then you look at every single other race and you're just like, oh boy, it's not good. And that's really how I feel about like every single thing that's happening with every person in politics everywhere. You know, just like, oh my God. Yeah.
Like, I will say in the online world, one thing I am appreciating about all this is that, like, the old adage about, like, conservative comedy being just when you're too angry and sarcastic to be funny has always been true, but it's especially great now because I forgot how good it is when they're actually, with Kamala, it's a woman and a minority, so they are legitimately very angry at her. So, like, I just like seeing how, like, impotently furious they get when they try and dunk on her. And, like, I saw like, a 40-year-old guy call her a dirty hoe, like, as an insult. Like, that's something the Cat in the Hat said to be ironic 20 years ago. It's like, it's just seeing what a middle-aged, like what a person who thinks that they're funny, what they're trying to do when they're being like irreverent about a political candidate now. It's just like, it's like Meltdown May for the whole year now. It's going to be great.
Yeah. It's really fucking wild to see like the right wing is just fucking apoplectic about this. I mean, like, also, like, the liberals are just, like, crying their eyes out because for the first time, the Democratic establishment didn't immediately kowtow to their exact desires. They did something shrewd and tactical, which they should have been doing, you know, for 100 years, but I've just now figured out. Yeah, and so, like, seeing the libs freak the fuck out is a certain degree of funny, but definitely with the right-wing response has just been like pure blood-curdling rage. And I don't know, man. It's just pure rage, and also just like I've seen like this resurgence of just like the vilest racism and sexism that it made me feel like, honestly, it made me feel like I was looking at the early days of like political commentary on Something Awful, that not specifically from Something Awful, but I guess when I was first using the website, and like the crude, vile political responses to feminism and Hillary Clinton and every conceivable type of politicking in like the early 2000s, which was just like this caveman brain shit where they're just legit people were just like, I don't think a woman should be office. What if she menstruates all over the Constitution? You know what I mean? Like, like just
what if this woman in her 60s starts PMSing all over the place? You know, as postmenopausal women are wont to do.
Yeah. So it's just like, holy shit, these guys have not evolved. Like, now that of course they haven't fixed their hearts. Why would they fix their hearts? They are still, you know, the same vile fucks that they've been forever. You know, it's like the Rush Limbaugh brain that has infected the right wing for a million years. But
still quoting Anchorman.
Yeah, still quoting Anchorman. You know what I mean? And it's just like the resurgence of like 4chan types of like insanely, grotesquely, violently racist and violently sexist memes where like, you know, it's Kamala Harris with like a big old piece of fried chicken and a watermelon, and like later on in that same thread, that exact same user is saying, but she's not actually even really black. And it's like, oh, pick a fucking side. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like you're shooting all of these arrows and you're just not even agreeing on where the target actually is. You know, but I also got a bullseye. But I also got a bullseye on all of these targets, but I can't tell you what the target is. It's like, ew. It's I don't know. It makes me think of there's been a number of times in my life when I could tell that someone was just having like a full on tantrum, like a beyond childhood, right? Where like I had like an ex from a million years ago who would message me off and on, and would just like pick anything to scream at me about, which was very funny because like she didn't know me, because like last time we had talked I was like 18 and she's doing this when I'm like 29, right? But she would like, oh, you're working out now, you're at the gym, well I bet it's all gonna go to your head and you're gonna get super swole and you're gonna be so huge that nobody wants to be around you and you're gonna get on steroids, it's gonna fuck your, it's like all of this. It's just like, you really think I'm that committed to working out? You know what I mean? Like,
you imagined me doing something and then you got mad at me for the thing you imagined.
Yeah, like it's the exact same thing you're seeing with the right now, where you're just like seeing people freaking the fuck out and getting so goddamn mad, and they're just like throwing anything at the wall. They're calling Kamala Harris a socialist, which at no point in time could you call a Democrat, in like an American Democrat, a socialist, right? Never. They're even like the most egregious, Obama, you could make an argument that his Obamacare thing was like a step towards socialism, but it has nothing to do with like he himself is not a socialist, right? And so calling Kamala Harris a socialist is just like point to a physical piece of legislation that she's done that makes you think that she's a socialist, and they can't. They just want to scream, Like, and I mean, to put a button on all of this, the one thing that I keep coming back to is like, I just want to talk to all of the lib dems in the world and just say, it's okay to have an absolute moral enemy. You should not be excited to work with these people. They treat you like dog shit, and you shouldn't treat them better. Right? Like, what's the point of having an enemy if you're not going to be like, fuck you all the way? You know what I mean? Like, if Netanyahu suddenly said like, hey, we're gonna make the IDF carbon neutral, I'm not excited about that. Don't give these people anything. Scorched earth. Fuck them. Like if you can't at once say that Trump is this unbelievably evil thing using Hitlerian language and Project 2025 is the death of democracy, all of which those are true things, right? And then say, but we have to have decorum. No. What are you talking about? You don't have to have fucking decorum, man. Come on.
Yeah, definitely. I guess my button too is I'm kind of hoping that, like, for years we've had people that have been saying, like, no, it has to be Biden. He's the only person who can come in. If it was anyone else, it won't work. And they've been like saying that, with such conviction. And we just saw very quickly that no, but it's had to change it and everything was doing better now. And it's like, as someone who I'm hoping that like this is an experience that helps them kind of like shake them out of their groove and makes them kind of reconsider things. I know that's something that's happened to me in the past. And I know when you have some very strong conviction in something and it turns out to be completely wrong, that's either like a point for reflection or doubling down. And I'm hoping that like, maybe most of them won't, but I'm sure some people, this will be kind of like, oh yeah, things maybe I should reconsider how I've been thinking about things type of moment.
Yeah, it won't happen. That for sure. What you just said will definitely not happen. But I appreciate your gumption. Anyways, yeah. Hopefully Micro Center will message me while we're recording this so I can get my computer back and we can go back to thinking about things that are not this. You have a story for me today, don't you, Jay?
Yeah, no, I'm glad we had that feel-good intro because today's going to be a nice, fun, feel-good story just about like a guy who rules, who makes good stuff. And this episode, I titled the Everdraed Showcase because that's the name of this poster is named Everdraed, and they had a section on the website. I'll go over that. So, and sort of to tie into the thing I said earlier about Fred being laid up, the inception of this episode is that since Fred's been laid up with a broken rib and I've been playing video games with him, one of the games that we played was Undertale. And Undertale is a pretty big game by indie game standards. It's sold over 6 million copies just on Steam alone. One of the characters is in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which is a Nintendo game. Mm-hmm. A YouTuber gave a copy of it to the Pope. Like that was a whole thing. This is, yeah, where we can do our little bit of, we can talk a little bit Undertale right here before we move on because, you haven't played it before, right?
I have not, but I did. I can't remember. Some YouTuber did a whole video explaining why it's so brilliant. I think it's
probably H-Bomber guy. They did a big video on it. I think.
I don't think it was H-Bomber guy. It was. It might. Yeah,
a bunch of people have done videos on it. It was very popular.
Yeah. But yeah, no. I think that it looks really interesting. And I do like. I don't know. But at the same time, it does look like one of those games that like. In order to fully appreciate the phenomenon of the game, you would need to like play it at its heyday and also read 10,000 pages of lore that the fans have cooked up. And there's like all of this other stuff. Cause like, if you've played it and you loved it, that's great. I have not played it, but on its surface, it seems like it is a cool little indie game where depending on whether or not you like fight the monsters or let them all go, as you play through the game, it will give you different effects or like a different outcome that is like more peaceable and stuff like that. But the real heart of the Undertale cultural phenomenon was the fact that like the fans took this and ran with it, much in the same way that Stalker is like a really good, buggy, half mess of like a Slavjank game, but very atmospheric and very cool in many ways. And then what happened was the fans came together and made mods for it that like polished the living shit out of it and made it to this super beautiful, fully realized game. You know, so it's like a dialogue between creator and the fans, right?
Yeah, great that's game. A good way of putting it. Yeah, and like replaying it almost a decade after it came out, like it's interesting, because the tricks that it did, like the meta stuff, like where it's about stuff like characters being aware that they're in a game and like persisting outside of individual playthroughs or whatever, like that's kind of been like what indie gaming is now. Like almost every indie game I feel like is some sort of meta or self-aware thing now. So it was kind of interesting to go back to sort of the progenitor of that. It's like, it's one of those games where I really like it, but like replaying it now, it was one of those things where it's like, there is a lot of, I feel like a lot of people who would really get a lot out of it and appreciate it wouldn't be able to make it through the friction you have to get to its kind of hidden depths. Like the idea of like someone who isn't like didn't know ahead of time that you're supposed to do these certain things to not kill the enemies, getting to the end and being like, okay, play the game again, but do it right this time to get the real ending. I could see them being like, no, thank you, and just kind of giving up, especially because it's one of those things where it's based so heavily on the characters, and you don't really get a good handle on the characters until after you've beaten the game. It's a very weird inertia thing where I definitely understand why people wouldn't like it, and especially why they would bounce off of it, and especially with the fan base becoming so big. I can understand why if you didn't like it, it would be really annoying to have people years after year being like, this is one of the best games ever made. It meant so much to me, when you're just like, it was just a game, but it means a lot to me. So I get it from both ends. So,
yeah.
But yeah, this was a huge phenomenon, and like a big part, like you said, was those characters and how people would sort of latch onto them and make their own versions of them and stuff. And I was playing this game with Fred, and we got to the final boss of the game, and I was like, oh yeah, a goon made this part, because when you get to the final boss of the game, like the game is normally like these cutesy pixel graphics, and then there's like a part where a character breaks out of the boundaries of the game into the real world, and the art style changes, and it's like a very like photorealistic, like flower robot monster.
Right.
And it doesn't look like anything else in the game, because most of the game was made by Toby Fox, but some of the things were made by other people. And that boss, Photoshop Flowey, was made by a Something Awful Photoshop guy, and also a Starmen.net superstar. I'll get to talk about them later. And his name was Everdraed. He was a poster on Something Awful. I have him here. He registered September 6, 2003. And his avatar is Pokey from the final boss of Earthbound. Because like I said, he's from Starmen.net, which was an Earthbound fan site. So this guy kind of came up in Earthbound fandom.
Okay. Yeah, so very interested in like that kind of like the weird middle ground where people go back to 8-bit and 16-bit gaming, and then they recreate things with like a lens for modern game sensibilities. So it's like the same kind of pixel art style or mechanics, but they are doing really, really advanced versions of it. Like you could kind of say the same thing as like, you know, The Binding of Isaac is very clearly inspired by The Legend of Zelda, hence the name. But that's The Binding of Isaac is, for a million reasons, not a game that could have existed at the time of its inspiration, right?
Yeah, it's one of those games like Shovel Knight where you couldn't actually run it on old hardware, but it evokes what it felt like to play those games.
Yeah, and for sure.
Yeah, and I guess for a moment, Starman.net, I wanted to mention them because that was one of the first forums I ever read and posted on, like when I was in like high school, like when I was like just starting to go on the internet. So they're still around. We're going to touch on that a little bit at the end, but I just wanted to mention because it's very cute. It's just dedicated to one game, and they're sort of like pretty well known as like a nice, supportive community that is still ongoing like 20 years later.
Yeah,
I love when you find places like that.
Yeah, it looks like they're still having fun. Yeah, I don't know anything about Undertale, any of that shit, unfortunately.
That's fine. Yeah, it's not really about that, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Cool.
And also, I did have his stats here. It looks like the last time Everdraed posted was May 16th of this year. He does still occasionally post to the Undertale and Deltarune threads. So he does show up every now and then still, which, you know, for famous goons doesn't happen as often. So
yeah,
well,
it just makes me think of the guy that made Petscop. I watched the whole. I can't remember who did the YouTube video like that. Like took down the whole history of Petscop and like figured out how all of it fit together. And that was one of those things that, like what we were just saying, was designed to look like a PlayStation 1 game. But it was like a playthrough of it narrated by the guy that was that had like found his copy from childhood. And Petscop's not a game that exists in the real world, but the story is told through these playthroughs and like how they're uploaded and things like that. And that one was one that was like really fucking evocative. And I don't know. I'm 33 years old. What can I say? Little creepypasta 3D horror stories like that really speak to me, you know? I grew up on Silent Hill, so that's kind of where that comes from.
Yeah, like I never really even followed the lore on those videos. I just watched them and kind of appreciated them as just like mood and atmosphere. And then later on when I saw the analyses, I was like, oh, there was a reason why they were walking around all weird like that. I thought that was it, but you know, you didn't have to know that to appreciate. I think that's one of the reasons I like that is that stuff is there if you like it, but if you don't, you can just appreciate it just for what it is, as like some creepy videos. And the Petscop is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess you did mention, just want to clarify, since Everdraed didn't make Undertale, that was Toby Fox's game, and he did most of the artwork, but he collaborated with some other artists for graphics, like Temmie Chang and Magnolia Porter, and since the whole thing with Undertale, like I mentioned, was the final boss was breaking into the real world, he was like, well, I need someone with a different art style than the rest of this, and that's where Everdraed comes in, because his whole thing is, he wasn't just like a Photoshop guy, he was a really good Photoshop guy, because he would take them and he would turn them into these really polished and smoothly animated GIFs, like, I dug up this Photoshop thread from 2014 when I was researching this, where people were editing a selfie this guy took at a furry convention. Also, it's very funny, it has the photo bucket watermark now, just because, you know, the internet falling apart all the time. So they were taking this picture, and this is 2014. You know, most of the entries were stuff like, you know, there he is with Hitler, right, there he is on 9/11, you know, normal stuff. And this is what Everdread's contribution was. He I'll let it play out here, but he like took the scene from The Shining and he edited it and like did like green screen cutouts and stuff on it and made this very complicated sort of scene of the blowjob scene where the dog guy sets up, and now it's the guy in the selfie, and it zooms in, and there's the convention model. Like, this is technically complicated way more than you'd see on something awful's Photoshop threads.
Yeah, this is 2 episodes in a row where we've mentioned the dog blowjob scene in The Shining, which is fascinating. Yeah, and I do remember that being a part of the experience of looking through these threads, like the Photoshop Friday threads of Something Awful. Is like a lot of them are pretty funny, and kind of the glory of it is they're made by kind of anybody. But there would every once in a while be one that just like so completely knocked it out of the park that it just made you look at all of the other ones and go like, holy shit, like this dude is doing something so different,
Yeah, that disparity was always really, really cool. And not just in Photoshops. Like, they have, like, the MS Paint or comic threads, and you have people who weren't artists, like, doing, like, stick figure comics, and you have people who were, like, worked as artists as their day jobs, coming in and just belting out quick comics that were very well made. And everyone was appreciated in their own way. That's very, I feel like that's a very encouraging environment when you can see someone who's really skilled is, like, working with you. And we're going to go over some, like he mentioned, his bio was earlier. He worked his day job as he's a video editor. So this is someone who is professionally like works with video editing, doing it as like for fun in their off hours, which is why they're sort of ahead of everyone else's work here. And I clipped one of his other, this is like a GIF, this one here. It's an edit of that scene from Silence of the Lambs where they approach Hannibal Lecter, except he edited his cell. So it's covered in like anime posters and you laugh at me because we're different. You laugh at you because we're all the same.
Yeah, it looks like
sort
a
of
fucking,
like fun little gags.
He's
like
got
that.
a little body pillow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like the camera is moving and it's all tracked on the wall. Like I'm sure Captain Disillusion could explain how he did this. It's very technical, it looks like.
Yeah.
And this one here is from this is sort of peak in a future saga we're going to be covering. This one here is from Doobie's Doghouse. They'd be doing one about like, it wouldn't even be a Photoshop thread. If he found a thread funny, he would just make something about it and drop it in there. So when we do the Doobie's Doghouse, you'll have the full context for this gif of a man dancing down a hallway holding a vent hood while frogs are moving by him.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I do like seeing like visions that are incomprehensible now, but they'll be fully realized later. And this was one that I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at.
Yeah. And another neat thing about him, on top of his visuals being really technically well made, is he would hide MP3 files in his Photoshops, where if you took the image file and opened them in Winamp, they would play a little message or song he had made that complemented the joke. Like, this was someone who, like, yeah, I actually asked Fred how this worked. Apparently it's because, like, MP3 scan from like the beginning of the file and images scan from the end of the file. So if you put like the marker on one side, it'll play as an MP3. And if you put on the other one, it'll load as an image. So you can have the same file, have both of those in there. And he would just, everyone, even on his bio, it'd be like his avatar in the Something Awful forums. You could play it in Winamp and it would have something hidden in it. He would just do this with everything. Yeah,
they did something like that. The Mick Gordon hid some images in the Doom 2016 soundtrack. And I think
I love those when you pull up like the waveforms and they're like little 666s and pentagrams.
Yeah, I don't think Manson's done anything like that, but he's done a lot of like backmasking and like hidden stuff. All throughout his stuff. But yeah, that's crazy. That's like a level of like computer understanding that is just so baffling to me. I just think about like if you wanted to like hide sensitive media so that like the government can't find out what you're doing, because I think about like people that use like Tor or whatever, anything that exists that is like, I mean, it goes both ways, where like if you created a file that would be completely perfectly encrypted, technically the government can allocate an enormous amount of resources to like de-encrypting it. And at the same time, if the government has something that is super hard for us to get, we can also crack our way into it if we know enough about what we're doing, right? And so it's always really funny to see people who like truly speak the code, you know?
Like with Everdraed, like back during Something Awful's peak, it was common to have like forum superstars, they'd call them, where there were posters that were just incredibly popular. And whenever they would post in a thread, it would derail the thread because you'd have pages of people reacting to it or commenting on it or being how good they were. And that kind of died out as the site went along. But even, you know, when Everdraed started posting, like he kind of blew up in the 2010s. And so even like post Hell Dump and GBS 2.0, Everdraed was universally beloved. Like just like that thread I went earlier where he did the furry one. Like I just posted some clips where everyone's just like, you know, I wonder what's like being Everdraed, having the ability to literally change an entire Photoshop thread. So should he desire, just multiple pages of people just praising him, being like basically a sorcerer. You know, just people love this guy.
Yeah, and also, like, as of this posting, it's not done for profit, right? It's just like...
Yeah, this was all in the forums. This was just fun stuff. Yeah, that's a big part of it, too, is we'll talk a little bit about how this kind of benefited him professionally at the end. But yeah, this is all just something that he did for fun on Something Awful. And he was aware of the fact that he was punching above his weight class with the work that he was doing. And I don't mean that in a stuck-up way. It's like I mentioned, like this was something he did as his job. So he was good at it, and he knew he was posting with largely amateurs, and he would talk about it. And he said that the reason why he liked to post on Something Awful was because when he posted on places like Reddit, he never really got any engagement or recognition, whereas and much more mediocre work would rise to the top because it was much more recognizable. Like I found he's taken down some of his images, so I couldn't find his entry, but it was like a Reddit Photoshop. They would have these little challenges, sort of like how Worth 1000 used to. And this one, it was like a crane. It was like, okay, edit this crane. And he made this really impressive looping video of the old computer game Pipe Dream, where it's like a loop of those videos lowering pipes as that green liquid flows through it. And it was like very well made and well done. And it got like 10 upvotes on there. And the thing that won the contest with 250 points was just like they pasted a guy from Grand Theft Auto in front of it and ran a filter over it, so it looked like a loading screen. Like that was the one that won. Second place was they edited Lego guys into it. And he elaborates a little more. Don't get me wrong, those Photoshops aren't terrible as far as ideas and executions go, although both could use a fair bit of work. I just think it's interesting to see how Reddit's terrible format creates utterly lopsided visibility that kills content creation in its poisonous womb. And like that's something we've talked about before. The way that on Reddit, something that's recognizable will rise to the top, or something that's good. So this one, he used these more recognizable brands, Grand Theft Auto and Lego, whereas something that was more technically made, and I think a better joke, but referenced a 90s computer game was much more overlooked. Yeah,
I was looking at some comments on Reddit recently, which I swear to God I never do. But I looked at it, I was looking at them recently, and I was just like, holy shit. Like, sometimes I worry that I might get a little too polemical about certain topics on this pod. And I know I've gone off about Reddit in the past, but Jesus Christ, they're still doing some of these jokes like 2024, and they're still like running these fucking bits into the ground, dude. And they're still the highest upvoted thing because it's just like, oh, I know the reference. I get the reference. And they throw it right up to the top. It's fascinating how, like, the lowest kind of content is just, like, they're clapping their forearms together over on Reddit, man. It's not good.
Yeah, or a really annoying one I've run into is now that like using Reddit and searches to find real things is more common, is where the people do the joke where someone will ask for help on a game and they'll give them bad advice on purpose, and everyone upvotes it because they get the joke because they're familiar with the game because they posted in that like I was playing Kenshi recently and I was looking for a place on where to build a base, and on Reddit everyone's like, oh, build it in this one region, and it's like a region where if you build a base then at night zombies come up and destroy everything. And it was just like, I mean, I didn't do it because I'd done more research, but it's just that sort of thing where it's like, yeah, the obvious joke of what if I gave you the bad advice on purpose now that Reddit is something that people actually use more as a resource is just very frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, it's just crabs in a bucket. Internet's full of assholes. We're all just going to tear ourselves apart. It's the way that all things work, you know? At the end of the day, the internet is just going to be bots and assholes. That's all it's going to be.
the really frustrating thing about this one is he went back and took a lot of his Imager uploads down, so a lot of them are missing. Like, there's one I was trying to find, because once he posted a thread that I'd made a thread about Ed Kramer, who's the co-founder of DragonCon. He has a problem where he's been arrested for like bringing teenagers to his hotel rooms a lot, and this was one of his recent arrests. He had like a really funny mugshot, and I'd like posted about it. And he did a Photoshop edit where it was the scene from from Return of the Jedi where Luke's pulling Vader's helmet off, except it's Kramer's face inside of it, and then when it cuts back, there's like a dancing stormtrooper cosplayer behind him. Like, he would just drop stuff like that in complete unrelated threads just because he thought there was something funny in it, and it was just really neat to see that in person. Just like, just to have him just grace my presence just out of nowhere.
I do like the idea of like, yeah, he had that problem that that happens where you just find yourself bringing teenagers back to your hotel room, which is just
that's part of why it was so funny because. Yeah.
The idea that someone's going to see you, be like, "Hey, come on, buddy, you know better than that." And he's like, "All right, you got me this time."
You got me. Yeah, and it was actually because he was wearing like a Harvey Weinstein neck brace at the time because he just kept going to court so much. So I guess that's part of why it looked so funny. He had like a huge neck beard and neck brace, so it was just all like bunched up around his face. Like, I can do that right now with my beard.
That's rough.
And like, even in the twilight years of the front page, like in the last couple of years when they weren't really having that many people regularly do content anymore, he was one of the last times they ever gave someone their own showcase on the front page as a new feature. From February of 2013 to August of 2013, every 2 weeks you'd get a little entry on the Everdraed showcase where he'd make a video or a collection of GIFs based on something that was happening online at the time. I don't know why it only lasted 6 months, but based off of what I've heard about working for Lotax, I imagine that Everdraed liked to be paid, and that became a problem at some point. So, I have this little. Just we're not gonna watch it, but just he would do little ones like he did an edit of like the I Ate the Bones commercial, like to give you the exact time period of when this came out. BioShock Infinite edit. One of his last ones he did was about Gone Home. There's something about Bitcoins, just very much like topical of the time humor. He would just make little edited videos out of them.
Yeah, the more I think about Bitcoin, the more I think like, boy, it really feels like that was the last like escape vessel from the hellscape that we're in now that departed early and then took just a few weirdos with it, and everyone else has been left behind. Because I just think like if I had a time machine to go back, there's no way I could figure out how to make the world perfect. I think people are just inherently flawed, and I don't know that we could fix anything. But if I just went back with like as much gold as I could buy right now with my now money, and just put that money into Bitcoin when it was worth like 1/13 of a penny, I could have had a different life, But every time I read about Bitcoin, especially when people were talking about Bitcoin in the past, when it was still just like it's 140 Bitcoins to buy a Pepsi, and now 140 Bitcoins can buy Pepsi. Like it's like we've definitely missed out on a different timeline by all of us not jumping on the board with that. But
oh yeah, because I'm from Jacksonville, which is where that $10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza trade happened, like the first real life one. So yeah, just
10,000 Bitcoins is like billions and billions of dollars. That's funny.
Yeah.
God.
The way I kind of get out of that though is I figure it's like for me to be the type of person that would have invested in Bitcoin, my personality would have had to have been so different that like I probably wouldn't want that person to be rich anyway. So
yeah, I wasn't a risk taker until recently, and even now I'm not very risky with my money. But yeah, just thinking back to all of that is just like, oh my God. I wouldn't have been the person to have bought Bitcoin, but, maybe I could have been convinced if I saw a time traveling version of myself. But I guess my first question is, what happened to girlfriend named Redacted, and also what happened to my hair? But, Bitcoin would definitely be top 3 questions,
I don't think that would work for me, because if it was any time after the last year, they'd just be like, who the hell are you? You're not me from the future.
Yeah.
You don't look anything like me.
Yeah, of course. But anyways,
Oh yeah, no, a lot of those videos are still up on his YouTube channel if you want to watch them. But like I mentioned, he did trim down a lot of his old videos and imager uploads over the years, so that's why I've had to describe some of them. I really wish I could find one he made where there was a thread where someone on Something Awful had posted about buying dog food because it was cheaper than human food in terms of like cent per gram of protein,
Yeah,
and so they
I
were
remember
challenged
that.
to eat dog food. And then a bunch of other people did it and recorded themselves. And then Everdraed went in at the end and he did an edit of the dog ending of Silent Hill 2, where it's the credits, but it's all the footage of goons eating the dog food over it. It was just very well made. You know, just with the Mayor Silent connection, I really wish I could have played that for you. But
Oh yeah, of course. That's funny.
yeah, and also kind of tying in with our themes about collaboration, Everdread was a pretty prolific collaborator. Like, Undertale was what blew up, but he worked with a bunch of other people. Like, in 2015, the same year that Undertale came out, he worked on a game called Shower with Your Dad Simulator 2015. Do you still shower with your dad? Which was a game that was made by somebody out. You didn't know about this game?
No, I mean, I heard about it, but it's still pretty fucking funny.
That title is because it was a couple goons made it, and it was sort of like a troll on how lax Steam Greenlight was, the way they were just letting anyone in who would be admitted, which now is very quaint in hindsight, now that there's not even Greenlight anymore and it's just anyone can put their game on there. But yeah, it was a good joke. It got a lot of press coverage. Like, At Midnight was a thing back then. It made it to At Midnight, and it was a 99-cent game. It's very fun. It has a lot of good Easter eggs, and Everdread did the trailer for it. He's a video editor, so he did the trailer for that.
Oh, Dad's got a big old dong too.
Yeah, the pixel dongs. It's very fun. And whenever the loading screens, I'll have the little dads telling dad jokes. It's very fun. Yeah, and after Undertale blew up, he stopped posting regularly on Something Awful. He was posting less frequently because of that, he was posting less frequently before that, but he still makes announcements about Undertale and Deltarune on Something Awful, like I mentioned. And going off his Twitter, he does work with Fangamer now, not just about Undertale. Like, he contributed to their Earthbound book. He made this really cool render of Dungeon Man on there. He does a lot of stuff, and considering how dark and mean a lot of the material on the show can be, I thought it was fun to have someone who's just like a nice, fun guy that everyone likes. And so it was just nice to have another just fun, pleasant one about a guy who just makes good work and got recognized for his good work, and now he's making a lot more good work. He's done the video editing for everything that Undertale related that has ever come out. Like, he's done the Deltarune ones, he did the anniversary concert. And that's kind of his big thing now, and he still works on other things too. So
yeah. It makes me think. I just watched, as of now, Devin Townsend's latest video diary for his YouTube, and I mean, the quick and dirty on Devin Townsend is he is a phenomenally talented musician who was his band used to be called Strapping Young Lad. And it was extreme metal that melted your face off and incorporated as many different types of music as it could, but it was also still very much extreme metal forward. It was also very funny. And when he left that band, or the band kind of broke up, they were very successful. They were definitely headline band. He created the Devin Townsend Project, and ever since then, he's been releasing these fully realized, brilliant, beautiful pieces of work that some of them are pure acoustic, some of them are really soft and lovely, and other ones are just insane, extreme power metal operas about Ziltoid the Omniscient is this tyrannical alien that comes to Earth in search of the universe's ultimate cup of coffee. One of the best albums of all time is called Deconstruction, and it's just his conversation about deconstructing his own experiences and his own philosophies and breaking it all down, and the conclusion that he draws out of it is the second to last song, and it's just unbelievably brilliant. He's an incredibly talented guy, but in listening to him talk on this diary, it's just really interesting because he's an old, he's not old, but he's a grown ass man, and he's been doing, he's extremely successful at an extremely niche thing, and he's done it well enough that he's now able to just do whatever he wants. He had an idea for a 3-album rock opera that has like video components and an orchestra and choirs and he's making it into like a short film. And so he's recording 3 albums and working with storyboard artists and orchestras and all of these different people to create his vision. And he got that by creating essentially like extremely heavy ass metal that was so successful that allowed him to do everything else. And that's the fucking dream. And that's kind of what Everdraed did in the same way to tie it back is like he was doing, online, shit posting and funny stuff for like a very small group of friends and slowly building together your portfolio and building a name and like an online identity of people who really love your stuff. This is before everybody, including me 1,000 times, we're all just shilling for follows. He was able to create this whole beautiful thing, and it rewarded him with like a career where he gets to make stuff that he likes. And that's really cool. That's kind of, at least my personal dream too.
Yeah, and because he has like less than 2,000 followers on Twitter. He's not a big social media person, and like Undertale, as big as it is, like when I talk about like people, my reply is always like, "Oh, I had no idea that this guy worked on this game," because he's just he hasn't as much of as much of an internet personality. He's just someone who makes good work and is fun to work with, which is the great way to get invited onto more projects. Yeah,
right.
And but I did think to sort of. To close this out, I think there was a very cute message from him in Undertale's anniversary a few years ago at the concert. Since there's not that much about him online, I just thought this would be a cute way to end it out. It's sort of him addressing. That's another interesting thing about Undertale too, is that it is a game that like is very popular with children and is sort of explicitly made like to be like E-rated. So having to, as someone who used to be a teacher, like being able to walk in both those worlds, someone who can like talk to kids and also like be funny to adults is very hard to pull off. So he's very cute at that. He has a little message here. Hey, and the way it's delivered is they were doing a concert, and then like rolled up balls of paper come on screen and unfold, and there's this message on here, and he read it. But it's, hey, it's me, Everdraed. I'm the guy who made all the Undertale trailers and weird flowy stuff that seems to fairly regularly upset children. I'm sorry, but not very. And there's a little dog sticking its tongue out. 6 years, incredible. Imagine if each of those years was a crab, that'd be 6 crabs. Incredible. But the years haven't been all crabs, sadly. We've had some rough times, but helping out with Undertale stuff and seeing it be such an uplifting thing for so many folks, it's really meant a lot. Thanks, Toby. Thanks, Toby. Just someone who seems to be very thankful for what they have is very sweet and cute. And as an extra cute little thing, like I mentioned earlier about how he was a Starman.net guy along with me, Clyde Mandolin Tomato online. He runs a website called Lost in Localization. It's great. He runs it. Everdraed, Starman.net, the only non-Earthbound forum they have on there is they have one dedicated to Undertale. So imagine, like, as a guy who came up on that community, having the thing that you worked on become, like imagine if the Hierophant still existed and was cool, and they had, like, a whole Winslow Domain section. Like, how cool that must be to have your old internet stomping ground make a whole section just for, like, something you worked on.
Thank God it's not. Let me tell you that.
That's what I specified was cool.
Yeah. I just before we recorded, I believe the cover for a Manson's first single since, like 2020.
The Troubles.
has dropped, and it's just like man, like how do I explain this where it's like I fully agree the guy sucks. But it's the thing where like some of his work is still really impactful and moving and brilliant, and I stand by some of the feelings I have for the art, right? Like when I was a fucking 15-year-old listening to Antichrist Superstar in the middle of the fucking countryside, like that means a lot to me, right? And like having that memory isn't hurting anybody. Like I'm not furthering my the man's career by just thinking about it, right? And so it's just really frustrating that every time that he floats into the conversation, the only thing that people ever say is that he sucks and that he's evil, which is like, dude, totally, fully agree. Absolutely. Fully agree. However, I did have some pretty meaningful experiences with this stuff back in the day. And it just bugs me how I feel like I have to thread the needle every time this topic comes up. And it's like, oh my God. It's the same kind of thing with like, imagine if you're like super into Star Wars and for some reason everybody calls Jabba the Hutt Jabba the Hoot, and you're like, no, that's so funny that you said it. It's actually Jabba the Hutt. In the original films, it was Jabba the Hutt. For some reason, everybody calls him Jabba the Hoot. It doesn't matter, but just so we're like, you don't need to bring this up at all, but it bugs you forever. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Anyways, thank God that the Hierophant is not anything where it is. The all of us have been scattered to the wind, very much so. But this was cool. I look forward to when you tell me all about Schmorky.
Yeah, I do have one little teaser that was very funny, because we just did a very cute and sweet community memorial. So I found something awful from a 2017. There's a thread called "I Miss Everdraed," and as a comparison to that, this poster motherfucker, they go, "He's a good dude, too good for these dead gay forisms." And then later on the same thread, someone talks about liking Undertale because it made them like feel emotions, and motherfucker goes, "How the fuck do pussies like you function? Like, if you thought the final boss of Undertale was scary, why don't you try living in a post 9/11 world 25/7?" Which is like.
Oh my God. I don't necessarily agree with the verbiage, but I do often think about the time I talk to people. I talked to somebody who was like, "Oh, I tried to play Skyrim, man. Too scary, man. They don't tell you it's a horror game." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "The first fucking thing you fight in the game are those big ass spiders, dude. Too fucking scary, dude. Way too scary, dude." And I'm just like, oh, fascinating. Like, you're cut from a totally different cloth than me. Like, in order to scare me, you have to, like, horror doesn't scare me. Abstraction scares me, right? Like, you have to go so much, like a big old slimy spider. That's not going to fucking do anything to me. What are you, a baby? Come on, man. What are we talking about?
Arachnophobia is weird like that. Like, I remember when Skyrim came out, one of the first mods was an arachnophobia mod, where it was like someone was afraid of spiders. They replaced the model with Spider-Man. So instead it was just like little Spider-Mans running around all four chasing you. It's like, oh, that's not
so
scary.
Much scarier. Because if I see multiple Spider-Men, I don't think multiverse. I think just dudes in Spider-Man suits that you see when you're walking down like Canal Street. You know, like I don't know if it's Canal Street. I don't know where the Spider-Men are in New York, right? The Spider-Men that will pose for pictures and shit. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, like, I obviously if it's a just an arachnophobia thing, sure, that's a thing that I don't have, so obviously it doesn't affect me. But for they did go on to say, like, I don't know, like fighting those skeletons and fighting like the ghouls and stuff. It's just all scary. I'm just like, it's wild. It's like I talked to my brother. I was super into Manson and I liked horror gaming a lot. And there's like, I have boring personal opinions about horror movies. 99% of them think that they're way smarter than they really are, because it's the kind of thing where they I think that horror movie directors saw zombie movies are political commentary about social issues, right? So I'm going to make my horror movie commentary on social issues, and then they do it in the dumbest conceivable way. You know what I mean? Like the most like all of the all of the zombies are wearing shirts that say inflation, and so it's like, oh boy, this is about economics, isn't it? But yeah, like I would my brother, Lady Gaga was too freaky for him. He's like, I don't know, she's wearing that meat dress. That's fucked up, man. I don't know, that's scary. I'm like, man. Interesting. You and I are very different people.
Why couldn't she sing about a good romance?
Yeah, God. Yeah. That's funny. But yeah, well, that was cool, man. We finally had someone who's not there's no part of this except for motherfucker at the end who was decidedly unpleasant. So, well, yeah, I think if you have any final notes here, we can just cut to the end. How you feel, man?
That's about it. Yes, we could mention our Patreon change here since we're at the end.
If you hadn't listened to the Hot Dad episodes, which you should, they're good. Hot Dad's great. Go listen to Banana Road. It's a new track that he just put out. Our Patreon is updated now, so if you donate at any level, you'll get access to the entire backlog of content that we've made there. Previously, it was at the $5 level. If you're already giving at $5, that's awesome, and we thank you very much. But yeah, if you just give $1 a month, you'll get everything that we've made. As for the people that are already at the $5 level, we're trying to figure out something fun to give you to reward you for being so cool and donating. All of that money goes to Jay and producer Steve. And if you want to support me, I do still have winslowdomain.com, which I have recently fixed a bug on my website, which was making it so you couldn't see all of the items in my shop. So if you've already been there once, please go and check it out again, because I have a bunch of new stuff. But you can find me on winslowdomain.com, and I'm at winslowdomain on Twitter, and on Instagram I'm at calculations. Still working on the card game every goddamn day, and on the road a lot too. I will be in Kansas City and Richmond for the Oddities and Curiosities Expo, so please come and say hi there. And Pittsburgh, I believe. Yes, Pittsburgh. So that's all for me. Jay, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm Jaybrandstetter pretty much everywhere. I've just been busy with work stuff, so the book's been going pretty slow, but I'm about to finish up, so that's pretty fun. I still got the revising ahead of me, but now that it's wrapping up, it's very fun to look back and start seeing the connections I wasn't conscious of at the time. Like, I guess for the show, one thing that's very funny is like a grenade winds up being very important in one of them, and it's just like, oh yeah, something awful. Huh, that's funny. So since this is something, I'm very excited to see, like, once I'm done editing it, seeing all these little connections that come out.
Yeah, sometimes it's fun to look over your own work and try to find the through lines that, other times it's an art critic that would try to line all those things up, but sometimes it's your own review of your own work, right? So
yeah, it is kind of fun. It's like, yeah, you're just when you write, it's just you're like walking out into nothing. Your brain's just filling stuff up in front of you. It's fun to look back and like, oh, that's the bridge it built. Interesting.
Yeah, I get that. Well, Thank you for listening. Please check out the Patreon, find us online, and if you have any ideas for shows, definitely shoot us an email at iftipod@gmail.com. You can follow us on iftipod on Twitter, iftipod on Twitter. But yeah, thanks for listening. I'm From the Internet is created by Jay Brandstetter and Winslow Domain. Edited by Steve Brown. Music by Steve Is Broke.